It was supposed to be just another long day at the restaurant. The kind of day that starts before the sun feels warm and ends when the streets outside are already quiet. The waiter had been on his feet since early morning, moving between tables, carrying plates, wiping spills, and forcing polite smiles even when his legs ached. He did not complain. He needed the job, and more than that, he believed in doing his work properly. The restaurant was one of those places where everything looked expensive. The lights were soft and golden. The chairs were heavy and polished, and the air smelled of rich food and quiet money. Most guests spoke in low voices, as if they were afraid of being heard. The waiter knew this place well. He had learned how to walk carefully so he would not make noise. He had learned which guests wanted attention, and which wanted to be left alone. He had learned how to disappear. That evening, the restaurant was full. A private event was happening in one section, while regular guests filled the rest. The waiter moved quickly, checking orders and refilling glasses. He noticed an elderly woman sitting near the center of the room. She was dressed simply compared to others, but there was something calm and dignified about her. She did not look around much. She kept her hands folded on the table and waited patiently, as if she had all the time in the world. Across from her sat a man who looked impatient. His movements were sharp. He tapped his fingers on the table and spoke louder than necessary. Even from a distance, the waiter could sense tension. The man leaned forward again and again, his face tight with anger. The elderly woman responded softly, her voice barely rising. She looked more tired than afraid. The waiter told himself not to stare. It was not his place. In this restaurant, staff were expected to see everything and react to nothing. Still, as he passed by with a tray, he heard enough to know something was wrong. The man accused the woman of embarrassing him. He spoke as if she were a problem to be managed, not a person. Other guests noticed too. Some glanced over and quickly looked away. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but silent. No one said anything. The waiter felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He had seen arguments before, but this felt different. There was disrespect in the air, thick and ugly. He went into the service area and tried to focus on his tasks. He reminded himself of his responsibilities. He thought about the rent he had to pay, the family members who depended on him, the manager who was strict about rules. He told himself it would end soon. Arguments usually did. When he returned to the dining area, the tension had grown worse. The man's voice was louder now. He stood up from his chair, towering over the elderly woman. His words were sharp and cutting. The woman looked up at him, her eyes filled with something that hurt to see. Not fear alone, but disappointment. The waiter slowed his steps. His heart began to beat faster. He looked around, hoping someone else would step in. A manager, a guest, anyone. But the room stayed still. The music played softly, almost cruelly calm. Then it happened. The man raised his hand. It was not fast. It was not sudden. It was slow enough that everyone understood what it meant. A clear, ugly threat hanging in the air. The elderly woman did not scream. She did not move away. She simply closed her eyes. Something inside the waiter broke. He did not think about his job. He did not think about rules or consequences. His body moved before his mind could stop it. He stepped forward, placing himself between the raised hand and the woman's face. His tray slipped from his grip and clattered softly to the floor. The room gasped. The man's hand did not stop in time. It struck the waiter instead, across the shoulder and side of the face. It was not hard enough to cause serious harm, but it was loud enough to shock everyone. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. The waiter staggered slightly, but did not fall. He felt a sharp sting, then heat, then a strange calm. He stood straight, looking at the man, his voice steady despite the rush of fear and pain. "That's enough," he said quietly. The elderly woman grabbed his arm, her hands shaking. She looked at him with wide eyes, as if she could not believe what he had done. The man stared back in disbelief, his anger now mixed with surprise. For a moment, no one moved. The waiter was aware of every sound, the hum of the lights, the soft music, his own breathing. He could feel every eye in the room on him. He knew he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Then voices erupted. Some guests stood up. A manager rushed over, his face pale. Another staff member called for security. The man began shouting, demanding to know who the waiter thought he was. He demanded punishment. He demanded the waiter be fired on the spot. The waiter did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, allowing the manager to pull him aside. As he was led away, he glanced back once. The elderly woman was still standing, one hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. He did not know who she was. He did not know why she was there. He only knew that, for one moment, doing nothing felt worse than any punishment that might come next. As the doors to the service hallway closed behind him, the noise of the restaurant faded. The waiter leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. He had no idea that someone else in that room had seen everything. Someone who would soon change his life in ways he could never imagine. The service hallway felt colder than the dining room. The waiter stood there with his back against the wall, trying to slow his breathing. His shoulders still burned where the man's hand had struck him. It was not the pain that bothered him most. It was the quiet that followed, the heavy silence filled with questions he could not answer yet. A manager stood a few steps away, speaking in a low, tense voice into a phone. Another staff member hovered nearby, unsure what to do. No one looked directly at the waiter. It was as if acknowledging him would make the situation harder to control. He replayed the moment again and again in his mind. The raised hand, the woman's closed eyes, his own body moving forward without permission. Part of him wondered if he should have stayed still. If he had just waited, maybe security would have arrived. Maybe someone else would have acted. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one had moved. Not until he did. The manager finally turned toward him. His face showed more worry than anger, but his voice was firm. "You know this is serious," he said. "You can't put your hands on a guest. No matter what." The waiter nodded. "I didn't hit him," he said softly. "I just stepped in front." "That doesn't change how it looks," the manager replied. "The guest is demanding action. He's very upset." The waiter looked down at the floor. He felt small suddenly, like the walls were closing in. This job was everything to him right now. It paid the bills. It kept things steady. Losing it would not just hurt him. It would hurt people who depended on him. "I understand," he said. "If I'm fired, I won't argue." The manager paused, surprised by his calm response. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice quieter now. The waiter thought for a moment. "Because she didn't deserve that," he said simply. Before the manager could reply, voices grew louder on the other side of the door. The angry man was still shouting, demanding that the waiter be brought back out. He wanted an apology. He wanted compensation. He wanted control. Security arrived and stood near the door. The manager sighed. "Stay here," he told the waiter. "I need to deal with this." Left alone, the waiter slid down the wall and sat on the floor. His hand shook slightly now that the rush had faded. He pressed his palms together, grounding himself. He thought of his childhood, of being taught that respect mattered more than money. He remembered his mother telling him that walking away from wrong things was not the same as being peaceful. A few minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time felt strange. When the door opened again, it was not the manager who stepped in first. It was the elderly woman. She moved slowly, supported by another staff member. When she saw the waiter sitting on the floor, she hurried as much as she could and reached out for him. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have had to do that. You could lose your job." The waiter stood up quickly. "Please don't worry," he said. "I'm fine." She shook her head. "No, you're not," she replied. "You stood up for me when no one else did." Her eyes filled with tears. "I've lived a long life. I've seen many rooms like that one. People look away very easily." He didn't know what to say. He was not used to being thanked. He was used to blending in. Before either of them could speak again, the manager returned. His expression had changed. He looked unsettled, as if something unexpected had happened. "Ma'am," he said to the woman, "security is escorting the gentleman outside, but there's something else." She nodded slowly. "I know," she said. The waiter noticed the way the manager spoke to her now, with respect, almost with caution. The woman turned back to the waiter. "Please," she said gently, "don't leave yet. Someone wants to speak with you." The waiter felt a knot form in his stomach. He assumed it would be a final warning, or paperwork for his dismissal. He followed them back toward the dining area. The restaurant looked different now. Conversations were low and uncertain. People watched him openly this time. Some faces showed approval. Others showed curiosity. A few still showed judgment. Near the far end of the room stood a man who had not moved during the chaos. He was well dressed, but not flashy. He carried himself quietly, with a presence that didn't need to announce itself. He had been sitting alone, observing everything. The waiter didn't know who he was, but the manager clearly did. So did several staff members who suddenly straightened their posture. The man stepped forward. His eyes were calm, but intense. He looked at the waiter for a long moment, then at the elderly woman. "Are you all right?" he asked her. She nodded, thanks to him. The man turned back to the waiter. "You didn't know who she was," he said. "No," the waiter replied honestly. "You didn't know who I was either," the man continued. "No," the waiter said again. A small smile appeared on the man's face. "Good," he said. "That makes what you did matter more." The room felt impossibly quiet. The man took a breath. "That woman is my mother," he said. "And I watched someone threaten her in a room full of people who chose comfort over courage." He paused, letting his words settle. "Except you." The waiter felt his throat tighten. He suddenly understood why the manager looked nervous, why security moved so quickly, why the atmosphere had shifted. "I don't care about status," the man continued. "I care about character. And today, you showed it without asking for anything in return." The waiter swallowed hard. "I just did what felt right," he said. The man nodded. That's usually the hardest thing to do. Around them, guests listened in silence. Some lowered their heads. Others leaned forward, drawn into the moment. The man turned to the manager. "This employee will not be punished," he said calmly. "If anything, the restaurant should be proud of him." Relief washed over the waiter, so strongly that his knees nearly weakened. But the man was not finished. "There's more to this," he said, looking back at the waiter. "And it doesn't end tonight." The waiter had no idea what that meant. He only knew that his life, which had felt so small and predictable hours earlier, was now standing at the edge of something unknown. And for the first time, he wondered if stepping forward had not just protected someone else, but had quietly opened a door for him too. The waiter followed the elderly woman and the manager back into the dining area. His legs felt heavy, and every step made him more aware of the eyes watching him. The restaurant had fallen into a quiet, tense stillness, like everyone was waiting for the next move to unfold. Even the clinking of glasses seemed louder than usual. He felt nervous, though the man he didn't know had spoken kindly. He had also said, "This doesn't end tonight." The words lingered in the air, pressing down on him. He did not know what to expect. He had never been in a situation like this. Normally, his life was predictable. Take orders, serve food, stay out of trouble. Now, the predictable had vanished. The elderly woman guided him to a chair near the center of the room. She sat down slowly, as if each movement was carefully measured. The waiter stood nearby, unsure whether he should sit or remain standing. The man who had watched everything from the start now approached. He moved with calm authority, yet there was no arrogance in his posture. Every step felt deliberate. "You have a strong sense of what is right," the man said quietly. "That is rare." The waiter nodded, unsure how to respond. "I just couldn't watch her get hurt," he admitted. The man smiled faintly. "It's more than that. You didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate whether it was worth the risk. You just acted." A few other staff members began to gather nearby, curiosity overriding protocol. They whispered softly among themselves, careful not to be noticed. Some guests peeked from their tables. The waiter suddenly felt very visible. He wished he could shrink, become invisible, but he stayed upright, listening. "Tell me something," the man continued. "Do you usually stand up for people, even when no one is looking?" The waiter thought for a moment. "I try," he said. "Most of the time. It's easier not to. But sometimes easier isn't the right thing." The man nodded slowly. "Exactly. Most people choose comfort over courage. They weigh their safety and convenience and decide not to act. You chose differently." The waiter felt a mixture of pride and unease. Praise from someone important was new to him. He was not used to attention, especially in such a public setting. He glanced at the elderly woman. Her eyes were gentle but intense. She seemed to understand him in a way others never had. Meanwhile, the angry man who had caused all this was being escorted out by security. The guests watched in silence as the confrontation ended. Some nodded subtly, as if silently supporting the waiter's actions. Others looked surprised that the situation had concluded without more drama. The man, who had observed everything, finally turned fully to the waiter. "You have no idea who you saved today," he said. "Not just her, but me, in ways you cannot imagine." The waiter's eyebrows rose. "I don't understand," he admitted. "You will," the man replied. "But first, let me tell you a story." He motioned for the waiter to follow him toward a quieter corner of the room. The staff and guests instinctively gave him space. The waiter obeyed, unsure what was coming next. The man spoke in a low voice, almost as if sharing a secret. He explained that his mother had endured challenges he could not bear to talk about publicly. She had faced disrespect and mistreatment many times in her life, simply because people assumed she was weak or powerless. And yet, she had raised him with strength, teaching him the importance of character above all else. The waiter listened intently, realizing that he had unknowingly stepped into a life that was layered with history, struggle, and care. The man's gaze remained steady, studying the waiter as if trying to see beyond appearances, beyond the uniform, beyond the simple act of stepping forward. "You didn't see me," the man said finally. "You didn't know my identity. That makes what you did pure. You acted without expectation. That is more valuable than anything money can buy." The waiter felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never thought about courage this way before. It was one thing to follow rules, another to act morally, and another entirely to act when there was no personal gain. He felt small and large at the same time. Small, because he had no idea how this man would react. Large, because he had done something truly human. A hush settled over the room. The guests and staff seemed to sense that something significant had happened. Whispers spread, careful not to interrupt. Some faces were lit with admiration, others with curiosity. The waiter realized that one small act had rippled outward in ways he could not have predicted. The man continued, now speaking to the waiter directly. "Your actions have consequences that extend beyond tonight. You will see this in time. But understand this. Courage like yours is recognized, even when it seems unnoticed, and you have made an impression that cannot be erased." The waiter nodded slowly. He did not fully understand, but he felt the weight of those words. They were not praise. They were a promise. Then the man did something unexpected. He placed a hand on the waiter's shoulder. The gesture was brief, but it carried significance, warmth, and approval. In that moment, the waiter felt a surge of confidence, though he tried not to show it. He had protected someone in a vulnerable moment, and that had mattered to the right person. The elderly woman spoke softly from her seat. "You don't know how often people walk away," she said. "You didn't. That is a gift." The waiter smiled faintly. Humbled, he glanced around at the faces of the people who had witnessed the scene. He realized that courage was contagious. Just one act of doing what is right could quietly shift the energy in a room. People noticed, even if they said nothing. The man's eyes returned to the waiter, serious now. "Tonight is not the end. There is more to come. You will be involved in something that will change your life, though not in the way you expect." The waiter's stomach tightened. Fear mingled with excitement. His life had been ordinary, predictable. Now, it seemed anything was possible. He did not know how to react, so he stayed silent. A few moments later, the manager approached. He looked uncertain but relieved. "I don't know exactly what is happening," he said, glancing at the man. "But for now, you're not in trouble. The guest is insisting it." The waiter nodded, gratitude rising within him, relief mixed with anticipation. This was a turning point. He could feel it in his bones. As the staff began to resume their work, the waiter remained in place. He realized that his life had quietly shifted in an instant. He had acted without expectation. protected someone without concern for himself, and in doing so, had captured the attention of someone whose influence could change everything. The elderly woman's eyes met his again. She gave him a small, understanding smile. In that smile, the waiter saw something deeper than gratitude, recognition, respect, and trust. The man finally nodded once and stepped back, blending into the room as though he had been observing for years. He left the waiter with a sense of anticipation and uncertainty. There were no more instructions, no clear next steps, only the feeling that something important had begun. The waiter stood silently, taking in the weight of the moment. He did not fully understand the future, but he understood courage, consequence, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. And he knew that life would not be the same after this night. The waiter could not stop thinking about what had happened, even as he resumed his duties, carrying trays and refilling drinks. The events of the evening replayed in his mind. Every step he took seemed heavier now, not because of the work itself, but because he realized that one single action could change the course of a life, his own and someone else's. The manager had left him a note, instructing him to finish his shift and meet in the office afterward. The waiter's hands trembled slightly as he poured water into glasses, careful not to spill. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. He had acted without thinking, and now the weight of what he had done was settling on him. As he worked, he noticed subtle changes in the restaurant. Staff members were quieter, yet more attentive. Guests were watching him, some with curiosity, others with admiration. The energy in the room had shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough that he felt it. He had disrupted the ordinary flow of the restaurant, and in doing so, he had drawn attention in a way he could not ignore. After closing time, the manager finally approached him. "Follow me," he said softly. They walked through the empty dining area to the office at the back. The room smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. The manager motioned for the waiter to sit. "I've never seen anything like what you did tonight," the manager said, lowering his voice. "I thought you were going to be in serious trouble. But then that man, the one with the calm presence, he insisted you not only stay but be recognized for your actions." The waiter nodded, unsure how to respond. I couldn't let her get hurt," he said simply. The manager leaned back in his chair. "I understand that, but you need to know something. That man has influence beyond what you can imagine. He's not just any guest. He watches people, not for appearances, but for character. And tonight, he saw something in you that most people never get to see." The waiter felt his pulse quicken. Influence beyond imagination? He had worked in the restaurant for years, never imagining his life could intersect with someone so powerful. He felt both anxious and curious. "Character?" he asked. "That's all." The manager nodded. "It's more than that. He believes in rewarding people who act with integrity, who show courage without seeking attention. And tonight, you fit that description." Before he could say anything else, the office door opened. The man himself stepped inside. His presence filled the small room with a calm authority. The waiter rose immediately, unsure if he should sit or stand. "Sit," the man said gently, pointing to the chair across from him. The waiter obeyed, his heart pounding. "You acted without knowing who I was, without expecting anything," the man began. "That is why your action mattered more than you realize. It was pure, and it demonstrated something very rare in this world. Integrity in its simplest form." The waiter swallowed, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. He had never considered himself particularly brave or special. He had simply acted on instinct, doing what felt right. The man continued, his voice steady and measured. "There are few people who would step forward when no one else does, especially in a room full of witnesses. Most calculate risk first, safety second, and morality somewhere far down the list. You did not. You acted on principle, and that speaks volumes." The waiter felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had never been praised like this, not sincerely. The words resonated with him, touching something deep he had never acknowledged in himself. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't need to say anything," the man replied. "Just understand this. Tonight was not just an isolated event. It revealed something important about who you are, that has consequences, both for you and for the people around you. The waiter leaned forward slightly. Consequences? Yes, the man said. In life, people are often judged by what they do when no one is watching, by the moments that seem insignificant. But those moments are never truly insignificant. You've set something in motion tonight, though you may not see it immediately. The waiter nodded slowly, trying to grasp the weight of the words. He felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. His life had always been ordinary. Now, it seemed, it was shifting in ways he could not predict. The man studied him carefully. I want you to understand one thing. Courage is not always recognized immediately. Sometimes it is ignored, dismissed, or even punished, but it leaves an impression that cannot be erased. You have left such an impression tonight. The waiter swallowed hard. I just hope I didn't make things worse for anyone, he said quietly. The man smiled faintly. You made things better. You protected someone who needed it, without consideration for yourself. That is a rare quality. And tonight, it has been noticed by the right people. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the office lights. The waiter felt a shift within himself. Something had changed. He had acted. And the world had responded in kind, though not in ways he could yet fully understand. You will have opportunities, the man said finally. Opportunities that test your integrity, your courage, and your commitment to doing what is right. And I hope you will take them, because people like you, people who act without expectation, are needed now more than ever. The waiter nodded, a mix of anticipation and nervousness tightening in his chest. He did not fully understand what lay ahead, but he knew it would be different from the predictable life he had led until now. The elderly woman, who had quietly entered the office, placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't know how many times I've faced moments like tonight, she said softly. Most people step back. You step forward. You gave me dignity. That is priceless. He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the kindness and trust in her eyes. He had acted to protect her, but the impact of that act was larger than he had imagined. It reached beyond himself, beyond the restaurant, beyond a single moment. The man rose and looked at the waiter one final time. Remember this night, he said. Remember the way courage feels when it is required, when it is tested, and when it is noticed. It will guide you in ways that words cannot fully explain. The waiter nodded, feeling the truth in his words. He had lived a life of routine and predictability, but tonight had shattered that predictability. He realized that one small act of courage could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could never foresee. As the man and the elderly woman left the office, the waiter sat for a moment, absorbing the weight of the night. He had acted without expectation, yet life had responded in ways he had never imagined. He had protected someone, demonstrated integrity, and unknowingly caught the attention of someone who could change his life. He rose from the chair, a sense of calm settling over him. He knew the world had shifted, not just around him, but within him. Courage, he realized, was not always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it was quiet, subtle, and human, and sometimes it was enough to change everything. The next morning, the waiter arrived at the restaurant early, as he always did. But today felt different. The quiet anticipation from the previous night lingered in his chest. Something unspoken had shifted in the air, and even the manager seemed more relaxed, yet there was a tension that hinted at change. He moved through the kitchen and the empty dining area, setting up for the day, but his mind was elsewhere. Thoughts of the previous evening returned. The moment he had stepped forward, the strike that landed on his shoulder, the calm authority of the man who had seen everything, and the gratitude in the elderly woman's eyes. He felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. Life had handed him something unexpected, and he didn't know how to receive it. Mid-morning, as the restaurant slowly filled with its usual patrons, a small group arrived and was seated in a private section. The waiter noticed immediately that there was something different about them. They were quiet, their eyes observant, and they carried themselves with subtle confidence that only comes from experience. It was clear they were important, though he did not know their names or positions. A few minutes later, the man from the night before entered, walking calmly and deliberately. The room seemed to shift in response to him. The waiter's heart quickened. He approached cautiously, uncertain what to say or do. "Good morning," the man said, his voice calm and measured. "I wanted to see you first thing today." The waiter nodded. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "Sit," the man replied, gesturing to a chair at the table. The waiter hesitated for a moment before taking the seat across from him. "I've been thinking about last night," the man said. "What you did was simple, yet extraordinary. You know who I was. You didn't expect reward or recognition. You acted purely because it was right. That quality is rare, and it deserves to be nurtured." The waiter listened intently, feeling both nervous and honored. He had never imagined that a single act could carry such weight. "I want to offer you something," the man continued. "An opportunity. It's not a gift in the traditional sense, nor is it charity. It's a chance for growth, a way to ensure that courage and integrity like yours are recognized and rewarded." The waiter's mind raced. He had never received anything like this. He had worked hard, but his life had been ordinary, predictable. Now, it seemed a door had opened. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "You are ready," the man replied firmly. "Courage is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about acting when it's required. You've already demonstrated that. Now it's time to take the next step." He handed the waiter an envelope. The weight was light, but the significance was heavy. Inside were details of an opportunity, a program designed to train, mentor, and develop individuals with integrity and potential. It was a chance that could alter the course of his life. The waiter looked down at the envelope, overwhelmed. He had never considered that one moment of bravery could ripple outward and create a path towards something so meaningful. He felt a mixture of gratitude, disbelief, and excitement. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "There must be thousands of people who work here or elsewhere who could benefit from this." "Perhaps," the man said, "but most would not have acted as you did. Character reveals itself in small moments, and those moments are remembered by those who understand their value. You showed who you are, and that matters more than you can imagine." The waiter nodded slowly. He felt a sense of responsibility settle on him. This was not just an opportunity. It was a call to continue acting with courage, to live with integrity in ways that might be challenging, uncomfortable, and unknown. The elderly woman approached and placed her hand gently on his arm. "You don't know how many times I've needed someone like you," she said softly. "You've reminded me that there is still kindness and bravery in the world." The waiter felt tears prick his eyes. He had acted to protect her, never imagined the profound effect it would have. In that moment, he understood that courage is not measured by recognition alone, but by the quiet impact it leaves on others' lives. Over the next few weeks, the waiter began the program outlined in the envelope. He met mentors, learned new skills, and was introduced to experiences that challenged him in ways he had never anticipated. He discovered strengths he didn't know he possessed and learned to approach challenges with confidence and clarity. The lessons were not just professional. They were personal, shaping his perspective on life, ethics, and human connection. Word of his actions continued to circulate quietly. Staff and guests who had witnessed the night's event spoke in hushed tones, often praising his courage. The restaurant seemed subtly different now, infused with a quiet sense of respect and admiration. The waiter moved through his duties with a renewed sense of purpose, aware that his actions had created a ripple that extended far beyond the restaurant walls. One evening, the man returned to the restaurant. This time, he was accompanied by several people who were part of the program. They approached the waiter, greeting him warmly and acknowledging his dedication and character. The waiter felt a profound sense of belonging, a recognition that his life was expanding in ways he had never imagined. The elderly woman watched from a distance, her eyes filled with pride. She had witnessed countless moments of courage in her life, but few as genuine as the one displayed by the waiter. Her gratitude was deep, not just for her own safety, but for the reminder that humanity can be preserved through small acts of bravery. Months passed, and the waiter continued to grow within the program. He developed confidence, learned to navigate complex situations, and began to see the world through a lens of courage and integrity. He understood that life was not merely a series of routine tasks, but a canvas on which one could act with purpose, kindness, and moral clarity. One day, the man who had initiated the program approached him again. "You've done well," he said. "But remember, the true test of courage is not in recognition or reward. It is in the daily choices, the small moments where no one is watching. Continue to act with integrity, and you will inspire others to do the same. The waiter nodded, feeling a profound sense of clarity. He understood that his life had been forever altered, not just by opportunity, but by the courage to act when it mattered most. He had protected someone, demonstrated integrity, and in doing so, opened a door to a future he had never imagined. As he left the restaurant that evening, he paused for a moment and looked back. The lights of the dining room glowed softly, the air filled with a hum of conversation, and the subtle movements of staff and guests. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that his actions had created ripples that would continue to expand, touching lives in ways he could never fully comprehend. The waiter realized that life's true measure is found not in wealth, status, or recognition, but in the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult or uncertain. That night, he walked home with a sense of purpose, a renewed commitment to integrity, and the knowledge that one small act of bravery can indeed change everything.